For years, I dreamed about traveling to Europe. I imagined what it would feel like, the places I would see, the experiences I would have, the memories I would make. And when the day finally came, everything looked exactly like I expected. The cities were beautiful, the landmarks were incredible, the atmosphere was unforgettable, but something felt wrong. I couldn't explain it at first. This was supposed to be the trip I had dreamed about for years. So why didn't it feel the way I thought it would? That question followed me through much of my journey. And eventually, I realized something surprising. The problem wasn't Europe. The problem was the picture I had created in my head before I ever got there. In this video, I'll share the moment I realized Europe wasn't what I expected, the mistake I didn't know I was making, and the lesson that completely changed the way I travel today. Chapter 1. The Europe I created in my mind. Long before I ever stepped foot in Europe, I had already built an entire version of it in my mind. And I didn't even realize I was doing it. Every travel video I watched, every photo I saw, every story I heard, added another piece to the picture. Europe became more than a destination. It became a dream. In my mind, it was the place where everything would finally feel different. The place where every day would be exciting. The place where every street would feel magical. The place where every moment would become a memory I'd never forget. And the longer I waited for the trip, the bigger that dream became. By the time I finally boarded the plane, I wasn't just traveling to Europe. I was traveling to the version of Europe I had imagined for years. The problem was, real places can never compete with perfect fantasies. Because fantasies don't include tired mornings. They don't include missed expectations. They don't include ordinary moments. They don't include the reality of being human. But I hadn't learned that lesson yet. At the beginning of the trip, everything seemed perfect. I remember walking through beautiful streets and thinking, I can't believe I'm finally here. For a while, reality and expectations seemed to match. The cities were stunning. The architecture was incredible. The atmosphere felt different from anything I had experienced before. It felt like the dream was coming true. But slowly, small cracks started appearing in the picture I had built in my head. Nothing dramatic, nothing terrible, just little moments where reality didn't quite match what I expected. And at first, I ignored them. But those small moments were about to lead me to a realization that would completely change the way I viewed not only travel, but expectations themselves. And in the next chapter, I'll share the first signs that Europe wasn't matching the version I had imagined for so many years. Chapter 2. When the dream started to feel different. The first signs were easy to miss. Nothing major happened. There wasn't one dramatic moment where everything suddenly changed. Instead, it happened slowly. One small moment at a time. I remember waking up one morning during the trip and feeling normal. Not excited, not amazed, just normal. And that surprised me, because in my mind, Europe was supposed to feel extraordinary every single day. I had waited so long for this experience that I expected every moment to feel special. But real life doesn't stop just because you're in a different country. You still get tired. You still have off days. You still have moments where you feel distracted, overwhelmed, or emotionally drained. At first, I resisted that reality. I kept thinking, why doesn't this feel the way I imagined it would? I'd walk through beautiful places and catch myself feeling disappointed for reasons I couldn't explain. Not because the places weren't amazing. They were. Not because Europe wasn't beautiful. It absolutely was. The problem was that reality was competing against years of imagination. And imagination almost always wins that battle. Because imagination is perfect, reality isn't. Reality includes waiting. Reality includes fatigue. Reality includes moments that feel ordinary. The more I compared the actual experience to the fantasy one had created in my head, the more I felt something was missing. And that led me into a dangerous mindset. Instead of appreciating what was happening, I started focusing on what wasn't happening. Instead of enjoying the experience I was having, I kept measuring it against the experience I thought I should be having. And that's when disappointment quietly started growing. Not because Europe had failed me, but because my expectations had become impossible for reality to satisfy. I didn't fully understand that yet, but I was about to. Because in the next chapter, I reached a moment where I finally had to confront the truth about why the trip wasn't feeling the way I expected. Chapter 3. The moment the truth hit me. There was one moment during the trip that I still remember clearly. Nothing had gone wrong. I wasn't lost. I wasn't dealing with a travel disaster. In fact, I was standing in a place I had dreamed about seeing for years. The kind of place people save photos of. The kind of place people travel across the world to visit. And yet, instead of feeling amazed, I felt disappointed. Not because the place wasn't beautiful. It was. Not because the experience was bad. It wasn't. The disappointment was coming from somewhere else. I remember standing there and thinking, is this it? And the moment that thought entered my mind, I felt guilty. Because I knew how fortunate I was to be there. I knew millions of people would love to have that opportunity. So why wasn't I feeling the way I thought I should feel? For a while, I blamed the trip. Maybe I had chosen the wrong destination. Maybe I had built the trip incorrectly. Maybe something was missing. But the more I reflected on it, the more I realized that none of those explanations made sense. The destination wasn't the problem. The trip wasn't the problem. The problem was something much harder to admit. I had spent years creating a perfect version of Europe in my imagination. And without realizing it, I had expected reality to live up to that fantasy. But reality was never supposed to compete with a fantasy. Reality is messy. Reality is imperfect. Reality includes amazing moments and ordinary moments. Reality includes excitement and disappointment. The truth finally hit me. I wasn't experiencing Europe for what it was. I was judging Europe for what it wasn't. And that realization stopped me in my tracks. Because for the first time, I could see what was really happening. My expectations weren't helping me enjoy the trip. They were preventing me from enjoying it. And once I saw that, everything started to change. In the next chapter, I'll share the realization that completely transformed the way I experienced the rest of the journey. Chapter 4. The realization that changed the rest of my trip. The turning point came when I stopped focusing on what Europe wasn't, and started paying attention to what it actually was. That sounds simple, but it completely changed the way I experienced the rest of the trip. Up until that moment, I had been comparing reality to a fantasy. A fantasy that had been built over years. A fantasy where every day felt magical, every experience felt life-changing, and every moment felt unforgettable. The problem was that no real experience could ever live up to that standard. Not because the experience was bad, but because perfection only exists in our imagination. And once I understood that, I stopped chasing the perfect trip. I stopped expecting every moment to be extraordinary. I stopped measuring reality against a dream. Instead, I started appreciating what was actually in front of me. The small moments, the unexpected moments, the ordinary moments, the moments I would have completely overlooked before. And something surprising happened. The less I demanded from the trip, the more I enjoyed it. The less I focused on what was missing, the more I noticed what was already there. I started feeling grateful instead of disappointed, present instead of distracted, curious instead of critical, and that's when Europe began to feel different. Not because Europe had changed, but because I had changed. I was no longer trying to force the trip to match a story I had written in my head. I was finally allowing myself to experience the real journey. And honestly, the real journey was far more interesting than the fantasy ever could have been. Because real experiences have imperfections. They have surprises. They have lessons. And sometimes, those lessons become the most valuable part of the entire trip. Looking back now, I'm grateful for that realization. Because it taught me something that applies far beyond travel. And in the next chapter, I'll share the lesson I brought home from Europe and why it continues to shape the way I approach new experiences today. Chapter 5. The lesson I brought home from Europe. When I first dreamed about Europe, I thought the trip would change my life because of where I was going. But looking back now, I realized the biggest change had nothing to do with the destination. It had everything to do with perspective. Europe taught me something I wish I had learned much earlier. The quality of an experience is often shaped less by reality, and more by the expectations we bring into it. The higher and more specific our expectations become, the easier it is to miss what's actually happening in front of us. That's exactly what I was doing. I was so focused on the Europe I imagined, that I wasn't fully appreciating the Europe I was experiencing. And the truth is, this doesn't only happen in travel. It happens in life. We imagine the perfect job, the perfect relationship, the perfect achievement, the perfect future. And when reality arrives, it looks different than the version we created in our minds. Not worse, just different. But if we're not careful, we spend so much time comparing reality to the fantasy that we fail to appreciate reality for what it is. That's the lesson Europe gave me. The goal isn't to eliminate expectations completely. The goal is to hold them lightly, to leave room for surprises, to leave room for imperfections, to leave room for reality to be itself. Because some of the best experiences in life don't happen when everything goes according to plan. They happen when we stop trying to control the experience and allow ourselves to be present in it. Ironically, the moment I stopped chasing the perfect Europe trip, I started enjoying Europe far more. I noticed more, I appreciated more, and I created memories that were real instead of trying to recreate the ones I had imagined. Today, when I think back on that journey, I don't remember the disappointment. I remember the lesson, and that lesson continues to help me whenever life doesn't match my expectations. Because now I know something I didn't know then. Sometimes the experience you need most isn't the one you imagine. It's the one that's actually happening. The difference between the dream and the journey. When people talk about travel, they usually talk about the highlights. The incredible views, the famous landmarks, the unforgettable moments, and those things absolutely matter. But what I didn't realize before this trip was that the most important lessons often come from the moments that don't go according to plan. The moments that challenge us. The moments that surprise us. The moments that force us to rethink what we thought we knew. For me, that moment came when I realized Europe wasn't what I expected. And strangely enough, that ended up being one of the best things that could have happened. Because it taught me to stop chasing perfect experiences. It taught me to stop comparing reality to a fantasy. And it taught me to appreciate the journey for what it actually was. Not what I hoped it would be. Not what social media made it look like. Not what I imagined years before the trip. But what it truly was. A real experience. With real emotions. Real surprises. Real lessons. And real memories. Looking back now, I don't wish Europe had matched the version I created in my mind. Because if it had, I might never have learned the lesson that changed the entire trip.